Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Anderson, and I am really happy to be here today to talk to you about the key role that core values play in your overall sense of happiness and well-being in both your personal and professional life. The info I'll be sharing is relevant to self-leadership as well as team leadership, so there should be something for everyone in today's presentation. In fact, let's check in to be sure you really do want to be here. You are in the right place if you've noticed that sometimes what you say is important to you doesn't seem to be mapping into your actual daily choices and daily habits. For example, if you say you'd like to be in better shape, but you're still hitting the vending machines, that's a disconnect. You're also in the right place if you've ever had the experience of making a decision about something important and then come to regret it later. For example, taking a job that paid more money even though you knew you'd be better off in a different work environment. Finally, you're in the right place if you're experiencing higher stress levels than you'd like, so you don't have a sense of satisfaction in either your personal or work life. Or maybe you'd like to find an easier way to achieve better results in your goals. These are all great reasons to be here, and I'm really glad that you are. It's always nice to know what you're going to be learning. So here's what we'll be covering. First, I'll tell you a little about my background so you know why the heck you should believe anything I have to say, right? Credibility is important. Then in part one, I'll share what research has to say on what we need to thrive in our social and work environments, and what the science of life values has taught us up until now. I promise this will be a very short summary of some previously published work. In part two, I'll introduce you to three major concepts from science to well-being's research: the rhetoric reality gap, core versus acquired values, and the expectation reality gap. And by the way, this work has been developed by Dr. Senka Holzer, PhD, who is a senior scientist at the Medical University of Graz, Austria. Senka partnered with two senior members of the professional coaching industry, Michelle Payne, MCC, and Lori Cozart, PCC, in order to make the research findings available through evidence-based coaching programs and tools. And that's why I'm here today, as your liaison to the process of discovering your core values. Then in part three, I'll give you some ideas why it's important to understand these three concepts and how you can apply them in leadership practice to bring more coherence and motivation to yourself and your team, all in order to create a more competitive edge and a deep sense of personal happiness. You know, I think you're going to find this to be really intriguing information because it may just explain why you might not have that sense of fulfillment and happiness that you're really looking for. And it also might explain why your team could be relating to each other much better than they are. So it's a lot of information, but it's really interesting, so I'm hoping you'll hang in there with me. Okay, here's a little about me. Again, my name is Jennifer Anderson, and I am the best-selling author of Plant Yourself Where You Will Bloom: How to Turn What Makes You Unique into a Meaningful and Lucrative Career. I'm a professional certified coach through the International Coach Federation and a professional mentor coach. In fact, this year, I'm celebrating my 20th anniversary as a coach, which for me is really exciting. I consider myself an early settler of the professional coaching industry, not quite a pioneer, but pretty close after. And I'm a faculty member of the University of California at Davis, Portland Community College, and Coach University. Most recently, I've partnered with Science to Wellbeing, which is an organization that has researched and developed the information that I'm sharing with you today. Finally, and definitely most importantly, I'm the mother of two wonderful adults and a ridiculously proud grandmother of one. And if any of you are college basketball fans, you'll understand why I'm also a very proud Jayhawk, and I just have to say, rock chalk. Okay, let's dive in. We're starting with the previously relevant research about what we need from our social and work environment in order to thrive. University of Rochester researchers Richard Ryan and Edward Dece's self-determination theory, which is a 40-year-old psychological theory on internal motivation and using our full potential, shows that humans have three basic psychological needs that must be satisfied in order to thrive. What I'd like you to know is that as far as psychological theories go, self-determination theory is one of the biggest out there. This is serious science, folks, with hundreds of researchers using the self-determination theory as the foundation of their own work, and thousands of studies backing the theory. Ryan and Dece's foundational paper received an astounding number of greater than 13,000 citations, making it the holy grail of motivational psychology. And here's an important side note. For something to be declared a psychological need, its deprivation or fulfillment has to have a clear and measurable effect on one's well-being, independent of whether one personally believes it's important or not. The authors of this theory described it this way: analogous to the idea that whether or not one subjectively appreciates vitamin C, its extended deprivation will still lead to scurvy. Okay, so what are these three universal psychological needs? There they are. The first one is autonomy, or a need to feel that we are in charge of our own life and choices. Second is competence, or a need to feel effective in what we do, as well as that through our work, we contribute to the greater good. And the third is relatedness, or a need for a sense of connection and belonging. Now, of course, it would be ideal if just being aware of these needs meant we would automatically behave in ways that support our needs at work and in our personal life. No such luck, because the whole picture is a little more complicated than this. But hey, even though it's complicated, we're going to make this a little more fun by looking at the network of cause and effect relationships among our needs, values, behaviors, and ultimately character, using the analogy of an apple tree. Why not? We're in the Pacific Northwest here. All right, so the root of our well-being lays in the satisfaction of our three basic psychological needs. You can see them here at the roots of the tree. But then things get more complicated. Each one of us has very different and unique ways of satisfying our needs for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And you can see these unique ways kind of wrapped around the trunk of the tree here. In short, we strive to meet these needs by acting on values that we believe are important. And here's the thing, we do it whether we're aware of these needs or not. For example, I'm going to give you a little chance to play with this. Right now, think of one person that you have a great relationship with. It could be someone you work with, your significant other, or maybe even a family member. So take a second and think about somebody that you have a great relationship with. Kind of picture them in your mind. All right, now write down a few words that positively describe that relationship. Maybe there's a great deal of loyalty between you, or you show a lot of kindness toward each other, or maybe you have a shared sense of adventure. The words that are showing on the slide around the trunk of the tree are examples of some of the words that you could pull from to capture what you think about your personal relationship with that person. So I'll give you a minute to think of a few words that positively describe that great relationship. Okay, hopefully that was easy for you. Well, let me share what I came up with. So in my really close relationships, one thing that I've noticed is that there's always a high level of trust and something that I call unconditional positive regard. In fact, sitting right next to me today is one of my closest friends and has been one of my closest friends for well over 20 years. And she is someone that I know that I can turn to at any moment of any day and ask for help if I need it. We always believe that we will take care of each other and that we always have each other's best interests at heart. So when I asked her to come and be here with me today, she was there for me. So that's an example of the values that can help us form great relationships and long-lasting relationships with people. So I get my need, that psychological need for relatedness, met through the shared values of the closest people in my life. And you do too. And of course, the same is true for the other two needs. The code for how we satisfy our needs is written in our values. We strive to meet our basic needs by acting on values that we consciously or subconsciously believe are important for feeling autonomous, related, and competent. So I know this makes things really complex, but guess what? There's another layer. We usually assume that others have the exact same definitions of what's important as we do, but that is not even close to the whole story. Science to Wellbeing's research showed that we actually have two completely different sets of values upon which we operate, and that acting on one of those sets of values is way more effective for our well-being than acting on the other. And most of us are not even aware of this dynamic. So I'm going to talk about these two sets of values for most of the remaining time. But for now, here's the big takeaway from all of this research. Please let this really sink in. All of your behaviors, no matter how big or small, are rooted in your values. Let me say that one more time. It's incredibly important. All of your behaviors, the actions you take on a daily basis, no matter how big or small they are rooted in your values. So you can see how important it is to know what they are. And taken all together, our needs, values, and actions ultimately shape our character. All right. Now let's switch to what we know from previous research about life values. One of the absolute authorities in this field of research is Milton Rokeach, whose scientific work on values is summarized in this book, Understanding Human Values, Individual and Societal. Two major messages from the decades of research work he spent on human values are, one, our values are pre-coding for behaviors. What this means is, for example, if you have a list of values and you rank equality as your number one value, you are very likely to naturally participate in things like civil rights marches. The same would be true if you highly ranked sustainability. You'd participate in activities that promote things like protecting the environment. So our values are pre-coding for our behaviors. The second major message from his research is that, and listen here, making a deep-rooted change in your behavior requires reevaluation of your value system. So we all are trying all the time to change behavior that we're not happy about, but to really make a deep-rooted change in the behavior, we have to reevaluate our value system. Based on its findings, a very common coaching and personal development training exercise emerged. Maybe some of you out there have had a chance to do it, especially if you've ever worked with a professional coach like me. In short, it goes like this. 1, you get a list of all kinds of different values. 2, you pick 10 of them that you find most important. 3, you rank order them. And then 4, you think of actions that you could do on a daily basis to bring more of what you value the most to your life. Although this was a good and evidence-based approach, the latest research showed that it still needed improvements. It didn't give the expected and straightforward results that people were looking for. Here are some of the potential underlying problems with this simple approach. Problem 1, there's a discrepancy between what we say is most important to us versus what is reflected in our behavior as most important. To illustrate this problem, here's a study with more than 3,000 participants across a wide spectrum of ages, social standards, and cultures. The study was conducted in the form of a survey in both the U.S. and in Germany. The survey had 10 questions, and the first one was, succeeding in which area of your life is your top priority? And here you can see the results. The majority of people in both countries said that love and relationships is the area of life in which they most want to succeed. This question was then followed by 8 random questions about work and relationships, but that data wasn't actually part of the study, so it wasn't analyzed. The last question was analyzed. In which area of your life are you putting the most effort to succeed? As you can see from the graphs, around 50% of the participants answered career, and only around 15% of U.S. participants answered with love and relationships. So it's obvious that there really is this large discrepancy between what we say is most important to us and where most of our efforts or behaviors are actually directed. The second problem, recognized by large numbers of researchers, is even when we have clearly set goals and a clear action plan, we don't stick to the plan. One of the best studied dynamics that confirms this is the research on New Year's resolutions. And I'm betting that a lot of you out there still set New Year's resolutions. It's just kind of what we do. So this dynamic that was studied is also known as the New Year's resolution paradox. So here are the numbers. Approximately 50% of the population makes New Year's resolutions. The first 2 weeks usually go along pretty beautifully. But guess what? By February, people are backsliding on those resolutions, and you have probably seen this if you're a member of a gym. It's crazy busy in January, and by February, it's back to normal. By July, less than 50% of people are still sticking with the resolutions. And actually, after 20 years as a coach, I don't even think most people make it to July. By December, around 90% of all people are back to where they started. And actually, all told, 88% of all resolutions that are set fail. All right, so the good news is you don't have to feel bad about yourself if you fall into that category, because now I'm going to introduce 3 major concepts whose understanding was experimentally demonstrated to greatly improve, 1, how well we can stick with our goals, 2, our work motivation, as well as 3, our overall psychological well-being. So this first concept, and you don't have to read everything that's written on this slide, so hang on there because I'm going to be describing it to you. The first concept is the rhetoric reality gap. All right, so that's where what you say and what the reality is really differs. Almost everyone finds at least some mismatch between what they say are their values and the values that actually drive their daily decisions, priorities, and actions. That's what we mean by the rhetoric reality gap. You say one thing, you do another. Being fully aware of the gap is the critical first step toward understanding why there's a partial detachment from what really matters the most to us. So, what is the force that pushes out of focus what we say is most important? I don't know about you, but it's like I completely forget what I said was important sometimes, and something's got to be causing that, right? Well, as I already mentioned, we operate on two different sets of values that work on two different levels. So the second concept I want you to be fully conscious about is core and acquired values. Core values are our innate values. Oh, they're just kind of born in us. They're what we really feel is valuable in life. They matter to us. They're just important. And acting on those values directly contributes to satisfying our needs for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. So core values, that's what really matters. On the other hand, acquired values are the values that we adopted from our environment. They're what our surroundings suggest we need to act on in order to have our basic psychological needs satisfied. This crucially important concept of core and acquired values comes directly from the research efforts of the Science to Wellbeing team that I'm representing here today. Impressively, their study won the first place research award at the 2015 Coaching in Leadership and Healthcare Conference that was organized by McLean Hospital's Institute of Coaching and Harvard Medical School. So now comes the really interesting part. At least I think it's really interesting. From which layers of our environment do you think we acquire our values? Well, let's find out. The first layer, closest to us, is our microenvironment, and that's family and really close friends. The next layer out is from our generational environment, school friends, teachers, media, social media. The third layer away from us is our cultural and national environment. Things like history classes, national symbols, prominent publications. Science to Wellbeing's research clearly showed that the more we are focused on our core values, the more we'll experience a sense of well-being, life satisfaction, and motivation for work. So remember, that's the things that are in that blue dot in the center, our core values. That's what we need to focus on in order to be really, really happy. And the opposite is also true. The more we're focused on our acquired values, those voices from outside of us, the more we're focused on those in our daily life, the more we'll have lower levels of well-being and motivation for work. So it's crucial to understand our own values as leaders and our team members' core values as well. When we understand what's making people tick, it can make all the difference. Okay, so this is so important that I want to make sure we give you some examples of the kinds of values that we can acquire from our external environment. So I'm going to ask you a question. What is one piece of advice from your parents or guardians that's really stuck with you over time? Take a second just to think about. You might hear somebody's voice in your head giving you a piece of advice. One piece of advice from your parents or guardians that really stuck with you. Okay, on this next slide, I'm going to show you some examples from our clients in three major categories: career, character building, and relationships. And I'm going to pull out an example from the career section because that's my core expertise as a coach. I'm an expert on people who want to change their career. And so I'm going to pick the second piece of advice. Choose a profession that'll make you rich. You may have heard that advice from somebody in your life. Here, the value is that money is more important than doing something you enjoy. Money's more important than doing something you enjoy for a living. So when you think about that piece of advice, what kind of choices do you think someone would make based on this particular acquired value? Well, I see it all the time in my work as a career coach. People take jobs that make them miserable just because they pay really well. And hey, I want to say that the first 10, 12 years of my career, that was absolutely what I did. And then we get stuck in a career because we've created an entire life based on making a certain amount of money. It's often referred to as the golden handcuff. Some of you might relate to that. All right, so let's talk about these generational values. It's that second ring out from the center. This slide represents how generational values can be influenced these days through social media. When you look at these pictures, is it any wonder that money and fame are two of the top acquired values of the younger generations? Nope, no surprise at all, right? All right, let's take a look at some of the national and cultural values. This is an actual list of American values that's distributed to incoming foreign students before they arrive in the U.S. Just glancing at this list, your first reaction may be one of pride. That's the idea behind national cultural values. But when you think about it, if someone comes to the U.S. without this list, they won't understand or necessarily even support these values. And this could be really problematic for key relationships in both personal and work environments. All right, so right now, think of another country that has a history totally different than ours. Japan might be a great example. I bet you can come up with a very different list of values that would be relevant to adapting to the Japanese culture. But again, if you're unaware of the implications of these national cultural values, you could unintentionally end up in really uncomfortable predicaments, a lot of friction in relationships. So what's really important to remember is that acquired values all start with good intentions. Just thinking about the microenvironment, that's our parents, right? And really close people in our lives. What do they want for us? They want to protect us. They want what's best for us. So their advice typically surrounds things that are going to protect us and do what's best for us. In the national or cultural environment, the people, our closest friends, social media, they're all just trying to make us feel understood and inspire us. In the national cultural environment, it's a big deal for everyone to feel safe, right? And to have a sense of belonging. This is clearly, the picture on here is from the Olympics, we're wearing the flag. We belong when we wear these things. All right, so the problem here is that this advice can be out of date, or it may originally come from acquired values, not necessarily core values. Right, so this is an example of how acquired values can be very misleading and actually, truthfully, can be really destructive. You can see that points 1 through 4 are objectively observable. She's got brown hair, clearly that's B. She's got blue eyes, clearly that's A. These judgments, well, the real problem here is points 5 and 6. These are judgments that are based on cultural biases regarding appearances, as opposed to something objectively observable. She's ugly or she's pretty. So this example came from an English book that is used to teach English as a second language in Germany. The book leads the reader to the conclusion that blonde hair is preferable to brown hair and blue eyes to brown eyes. As these biases are perpetuated, here's the real problem. Oftentimes people will take actions to try to live up to these arbitrary standards. Sometimes even personally harmful actions to unnecessarily change their appearance as a way to fit in. That leads us to the third and final concept, the expectation-reality gap. We adopt many of our acquired values based on voices outside of us. Some are really loud, and others are kind of subtle. They promise a good and happy life if we do certain things and avoid doing other things. So we work hard at meeting acquired, values-driven goals and expect the happiness as promised. However, many times the reality just doesn't match the promised happiness. So here's kind of a funny example of that. I don't know about you, but I have had a lot of kitchen fails like this, where I was expecting cute little teddy bear cookies and ended up with amorphous blobs. All right, so you can see in these research-based graphs that the achievement of goals that are based on those acquired values leads to spikes of happiness that peter out after a very short time. We've all had the experience of a life that is full of peaks and valleys when it comes to happiness and sadness. The more lasting effect of happiness definitely comes when we are focused on our core values. In fact, evidence shows that as we create achievements based on our core values, the things that just matter to us, whether we can explain it or not, they actually build on each other for greater and longer lasting experiences of happiness. So that basically means when you live up to your core values, you get happier and happier and happier. The reality is that we tend to internalize the outer voices that are espousing acquired values, the ones that are really taking a stand for values that are not necessarily our own. And it becomes this advocate in our mind. And this advocate can be really loud and aggressive, like this obnoxious chihuahua. We've all known people that kind of resemble this obnoxious chihuahua, don't you think? So unless we're aware of what matters most to us, also known as our core values, and learn to resist these social pressures, we will prioritize and respond to our acquired values first. And then we set unfulfilling goals as a result. So this is what that dynamic looks like in practice. This is me. Let's say that my top driving value is happiness. In my daily choices and habits, this is what I do. I try to defend my value and align my surroundings with it. This is my team. Each of us has a different set of top driving values. And this is what happens on a daily basis. Everyone's running around trying to make choices and use our habits to try to defend each of our individual values. So you can see how this would lead to misunderstandings when people are trying to work together. Seriously, everyone's running around trying to honor their individual values. And some of them may not even be values that really matter to them. If they really had to explain why they took such a stand, they might not even be able to do it. Okay, so what can you do about all of this? So the good news is that just being here today is a huge step forward for you to create more harmony and happiness in both your personal and your work life. You can accept that you have acquired values that aren't serving very well, and then choose whether to embrace them or let them go. Stop listening to that obnoxious voice inside your mind. Without question, as science has demonstrated, discovering and honoring your core values will create better personal relationships and more effective teams, and ultimately more rewarding successes and overall happiness and well-being. All right, so Paris, I think we're ready to open this up for any questions that you may have had. Did we get some questions out there? So what Paris was just sharing is that when we were asking about advice that we got from our parents, Noah shared that money doesn't grow on trees. And you know what? If one does, I think we'd all love to plant one of those in our backyard. So no, I think that's a really common one that a lot of people have heard. And so, yeah, so the value that we might act on based on that would be that we have to work really hard, right? We have to work really hard to make money. And honestly, the truth is that over these 20 years of being a career coach, what I've really noticed is that when people find work that they really love, that's really aligned with who they are, money, it doesn't just necessarily just follow. You know, I don't necessarily think it's true that money, do what you love and money will follow. But what really does happen is that you naturally and effortlessly start doing things that will produce the money. And they're a joy for you. They're things that you really have fun with. And people can sense that. They can see that. So vastly different experiences from having to work hard to make money to doing something that you really enjoy and finding a way to monetize it and seeing that experience of money coming to you. So you can see the shift in value there would be away from the acquired value of you have to work hard to a core value that I'm going to do work that really matters to me, that really makes the difference that I want to be seeing in the world. And that's a big part of what I do as a career coach, is help people figure out what it is that they'd really love to be doing. So I see this all the time in the work that I'm doing. So no other questions. Okay. Well, a couple of you have said, good job, Jen. So I just want to give a shout out to those of you who are being supportive there. And I think you just met my core need for connection and a depth of caring for each other. Oh, hey, look, we do have one more question that just came in. So we got one from Paige who said, do you have a preferred values exercise to help your clients choose core values? And Paige, that's a great question, and I actually do. We mentioned earlier one of the ways to do it is just to have a list of values and then pick your top 10 and then identify what value or what behaviors would allow you to express that. But that's what we found wasn't quite as effective. And so actually, Science to Wellbeing, the organization that I'm representing today, has created a step-by-step values identification program that's designed to help the individual like you recognize and measure your rhetoric reality gap and shift your focus towards your core values so that you will then begin designing actions that help you really live the life of your dreams. And so you can send a message. Paris, do you want them to send it to your email if they want to get in touch with me, or did you have another? You do?
Yes, my email, or if they... Yeah, I would just send it.
Okay, let me give you Paris's email so that you can, if you want to know more about that, either for yourself or for your team, you can send an email to Paris at Anvil, A-N-V-I-L, media.com, and she'll forward any request that you have to me. And I'd be happy to talk with anybody about the possibility of identifying the difference between your acquired values and your core values. And thanks again, Paige, because that really shows that you totally got what I was trying to do here today, and that feels great. So a couple of things that I want to share with everybody is if you would like to receive a copy of the presentation after the webinar, because I know there was a ton of info in this, and it can take a little bit to absorb it, but it really is great info. So if you'd like a copy of the presentation, you can email Paris at anvilmedia.com. That's Paris, just like in France, P-A-R-I-S at Anvil, A-N-V-I-L media.com. And Paris actually put that in the chat box, her email address, so you can grab it from there. Again, just one last thing is that if you're interested in more information about how you and or your team can discover your core and acquired values, I'm here to help you with that. So I just really want to thank everybody for being here today. It was a joy to bring you this important information. And no matter what happens next in your world, just know that when you're acting on what really is important to you, you're going to find a lot more happiness overall in your life.